Well, welcome back to the channel, Old Cars, New Van, and this is part 3 of every car I've ever owned. If you've watched part 1, you'll have seen all my daily drivers. Part 2 was the classic cars, the hobby cars and the kit cars. And this third part is every other car I've ever owned. Some of these won't have a logical reason behind them. Some of them will be that they're failed hobby cars that I bought, realised they weren't very good and moved them on quite quickly. And one or two others have got some stories behind them. So I'm going to make a start with the years 1990 to 1992, when again I had the Audi 80 as my main car. And the first car I bought was, I went just for a laugh to a car auction, and I bought this Austin Princess for £90, mainly because my dad had one once, back in the sort of 70s, well, early 80s actually. And it just seemed a bit of a laugh, and it was terrible, and I sold it within a couple of weeks of buying it. I also wanted a hobby car, really, as a Mini, because I'd never had one. And again, this is featured as the first hobby car that I bought in part 2. But there were a couple of failed attempts. First of all, there was this red one, which I bought, sort of purpley red one, and it really wasn't very good, and it was quite rotten. So again, that was sort of like a failed hobby car. And then I bought this lovely Estate, which was really nice, except that a friend of mine bullied me into selling it to them, so that didn't turn into my hobby car. So I ended up with the Mini Rose that was featured in part 2. This next car is an FSO, Polski Fiat. And there's a slight funny story about this, that I was going to Glastonbury Music Festival with some friends of mine in 1990, and without being too funny about it, we all had quite nice cars. I was in the Audi 80, friends were in other sort of similar cars, and we didn't think that was a particularly good idea, because I know Glastonbury today is quite a sort of, civilised family affair. It wasn't in 1990, and we thought it was more likely that our quite nice cars would be turned over and set on fire than it was that they'd be left alone. So I bought this funny shaped object, FSO, again for 90 quid. And it was all right. It got us all down to Glastonbury, and it got us all the way back. The problem started when we started leaving Glastonbury Festival after it being parked up for a few days. Pulling out, obviously there were loads of police around, and the boot just sort of flew open, so I had to stop in the middle of the road, close the boot and drive off again in front of all these police officers who were looking at me as if I was a criminal. So that was the start of it, and then on the journey home we lost every single electrical piece of equipment on the car apart from the headlights. First thing to go was the radio. Well, that was all right, we could cope without that. Then the temperature gauge, then the petrol gauge, then the heater blower, then the horn, then the wipers, then the indicators. So it was a right state by the time we got back. But it made it, and after that it had done its job, so I moved it on. White Ford Escort Estate, bought because I needed to shift some stuff, and having a saloon car, it wouldn't have fitted in, and it was actually cheaper to buy this, use it for 10 days and sell it again than it was to rent a van. So that's why I bought that car. I also then had a mad idea of earning some extra money as a taxi driver. I didn't really think this through at all, but it was a good excuse to go out and buy a car. So I bought this Stanza, because I thought that looked the part for a cab, and then I looked into it properly and realised how much it actually cost to put a car through its taxi plates and all the rest of it. So that never happened, and I sold the car as a consequence. You can see a pattern developing here of somewhat immature, stupid behaviour as a young man, can't you? Next, Silver Passat. Can't remember why I bought it, but I sold it to a then girlfriend who took a fancy to it, so that passed out of my possession. The next 4, I can't give you any logical reason why they were bought, so I'm just going to put the pictures up. Okay, this next one, Peugeot 305 Estate, again to move stuff around. I was moving house at college, at university, and it was just cheaper to buy an estate car, move stuff, and then sell the car than it was to hire a van. Volvo 240 DL, sort of a failed hobby car. I quite liked it, but for reasons I can't quite remember, I decided it wasn't for me. So again, sold it on within just a couple of weeks of owning it. Rather oddball, this one. Gold Subaru Estate car, sort of like goldy bronzy colour. Again, quite interesting. I don't think it was a four-wheel drive model, but again, a girlfriend at the time convinced me that she wanted it, so I ended up selling that to her. Another estate car, again for another move, this time an Escort, a more modern Escort estate. Again, kept it for a couple of weeks and then moved it on. And the next three, an ordinary Escort, a pale blue Mark 1 Fiesta and a Astra estate. I can't recall why, so I'm just going to let the pictures do the talking on those. And then I bought this Mitsubishi Colt only because, again, I think I was at a car auction and saw it. Was fascinated by the fact that it had two gear levers, because there was sort of like an override on all the gears. So you could be in first, low, move the second gear lever, and it was like changing up into second. It's really weird. So it was almost like an 8-speed gearbox. So I just bought it as a novelty. But again, that novelty didn't last very long. I think I sold that to a friend because it was quite a good car, actually. And then I bought this silver 3 Series BMW, which again was another failed hobby car because I really did like it. But again, I bought that at auction and I didn't notice that it had been hit up the back, just under the bumper. So it wasn't very obvious, but it had split the seams on either side, left and right, where the rear valance sort of meets the rear wings. I mean, it drove perfectly. But it was letting water into the boot as a consequence because of those splits. So again, a bit of a failed hobby car. And then these last two, again, I can't give you a logical reason why I bought them, but I did, so I've included them. So that takes me to the end of sort of university days, 1992. Didn't have any sort of silly cars in 93 because I was settling down and getting a job. But then from sort of 94 onwards up to and including the year sort of 2002 when I got into motorbikes, I did continue to have a series of sort of silly purchases, which I'm going to list here, which again are sort of maybe failed hobby cars or cars that I can't give you a logical reason why I bought them, but they didn't last very long. That's why they're in this group. First one was actually really nice, the Citroen BX GT. Very rare car even back then, but would be exceptionally rare today. Was really quite nice, and again I had thoughts of keeping that as a hobby car, but it didn't work out. The next couple I can't give you any logical reason again, so I'll just put the pictures up. And then I bought this old shape Granada because I always fancied one. Always, sort of like almost like watched too much Sweeney and The Professionals as a young man. So I always fancied that. And again, I had ideas of keeping that as sort of like a second car, but I think there were some significant problems with it. So that's why that didn't last very long. And then I went to sort of some car auctions just for a bit of fun and bought the next three vehicles just because they seemed good value and cheap at the time. But again, none of them lasted very long. And then I got back into Citroen BXs because I really missed the BX GT. Unfortunately, I couldn't find another GT or indeed a GTI. So I ended up with some sort of quite ordinary ones. The first being a BX Meteor, which is some sort of special edition. That was quite nice, actually. But again, because it was an ordinary car, it didn't last long. And when I sold that, the guy who bought it, it made me sound like a car trader, I'm not, said, would you take my old BX as part exchange? So I thought, why not? For once in a blue moon, I'll take a part X. So I ended up with this extremely tatty 1.6, I think it was, diesel BX, which again I had for about 10 days before I could convince somebody to buy it off me. So that's why that came and went. Next one was really nice. Again, it was meant to be a hobby car, Cavalier SR. Again, rare car. Even back in the day, was a rare car. Not the SRI, just the SR. But again, unfortunately, that got involved in an accident, so that didn't last very long. And then I seemed to acquire a string of rather sort of ordinary, tedious cars. So again, so the next four, I can't really give you a logical explanation, but I'll just put the pictures up. And with the sale of that last Sierra, I actually bought something I actually quite liked, which was a Granada 2.9 injection gear. Beast of an engine. Really quite liked it. Would have hung on to that longer, but the gearbox started slipping, so I had to get rid of that quite quickly. Shame. Nice car. Again, the next three just sort of silly impulse buys at car auctions, because this was almost like a hobby for me at this point. And then I got hold of this Honda Legend. This was really nice. Again, I sort of failed hobby car already because I was going to keep that longer. But again, like the Granada, unfortunately, the gearbox started slipping. So I sort of got it into my head that I wasn't very lucky with automatics at this point, because everyone I bought, the gearbox seemed to slip. So again, that one had to go fairly smartish. And the next four, again, fairly ordinary, boring cars that I just bought because they seemed good value at the time. And the very, very last car I bought that falls into this silly sort of every other car I've ever bought almost by accident category was really nice, actually. It was a Saab 9000, and I would have kept that, but I was moving house, and it was just mither to have an extra vehicle that I had to move to a new house. So that went actually within about 2.5 weeks of buying it. But it was really, really nice, and I've got quite a soft spot for Saab, and I think sooner or later I will have another one. So believe it or not, I think that is 46, is it? Silly extra other cars over my lifetime that I have bought. You'll be thankful to know that after 2002 I stopped doing this. Perhaps I'd grown up a little bit by this stage and thought that going out and buying silly cars was a bit of a waste of mine and everybody else's time. So it really ended then when I got into motorbikes. But I think they're worth recording as much for my benefit as yours, just as a sort of historical piece. So when I'm old and I can't remember, I can look back at these videos and remind myself of some of the silly things I've bought. As I said in parts 1 and 2, I'm not sure these videos will be for everyone, and they're as much for my benefit as yours, so you'll have to indulge me a little bit. But if you have got any interest out of them, I thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. There will be one more part, which will be cars of my childhood, where I'm just going to record some of the early cars that I can remember that my parents had, up to my age of sort of maybe 18, something like that. And some of my parents' friends' cars that I went to school in. Again, for posterity, I want to record them. And there's some really quite nice things in there because it was the 70s. So even though they were ordinary cars at the time, they'll be quite nice to look back at them. So see you in part 4. Thank you for watching.